This is a Nerd and Tie podcast. Welcome to Bullshit-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual BS. I'm your host, Trey Dorn, and we are back for yet another month of delving into the magical and spooky, and with an emphasis on spooky this time around, because, you know, this is your October episode. Coming up soon, when we release this at least, is Samhain, or for those of you who don't celebrate that holiday, Halloween. And if you don't celebrate Halloween, well, I just don't know if we can be friends. Okay, we can actually probably still be friends, but you're missing out because Halloween is great. And in the spirit, as we did last year, we're going to talk about ghosts. And just like last year, I'm not going to do it alone this year, as we have a guest on the podcast this episode.
I'm Bree NicGarran. I'm an author. I'm a witch, have been for about 15 years, and I am a compulsive hoarder of books.
And today we're going to talk about spooky stuff, because
yes,
it's that time of year.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
So it's in my experience, I have yet to meet a single witch who does not have some sort of ghost story. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm just talking to weird people, but in my experience, if someone's a witch at some point in their life, they at least think they've seen a ghost.
Honestly, I would think it would be more weird if someone was a witch and hadn't seen something or experienced something at some point in their lives.
Yeah. I think it's part of the there's a draw to the supernatural. You know, with shocker, for people who like to cast spells might be drawn to the supernatural in some sort of way.
My God, you don't say.
Yeah.
I did find that was actually very true for me, although for me it happened in reverse. I was interested in ghosts and the paranormal and stuff when I was a teenager, and then got into witchcraft properly a little bit later on, but the correlation was definitely still there.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I was into ghosts and the paranormal as, like, from a very young age. So before I knew that, you know, witchcraft was a thing. But, you know, I'm 39. It's, you know, when I was growing up as a kid in the 80s, well, obviously there was the modern witchcraft movement was, you know, existed. It wasn't in media anywhere near as much as it would be, like, say, even 10 years later.
True.
So it's, I think my being interested in the supernatural actually led me to maybe discover witchcraft in some way.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. It was pretty much fairy tales, ghosts, copy of Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, and and off we go.
Of course, Cunningham ended up in there somewhere.
Yeah, that was the very first book of witchcraft that I ever read. Actually, someone gave it to me as a gift, and they were like, "I think you might enjoy this," and it was like, "Yes, I think I will," and and it just kind of took off.
I don't know. I think also though, like, there's even, like, for me, when I was interested and thought I believed in the paranormal, and then I really became a believer after I actually saw something, though, much later in life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there's like like you haven't growing up, like I didn't end up spending a lot of time in any space that was considered haunted until I was a teenager. So that's probably, I mean, you know, if you don't spend time around haunted spaces, you probably won't see a ghost. It's probably a good lesson. But like the funny thing to me is like there's always like whenever you look up like haunted places like in your town or something like that, it's always like the oldest building here or the, you know, this ancient, you know, ancient, what am I talking about? We live in America, nothing's ancient. But like it's always like some old rich person's mansion. But like the haunted spaces that I spent time in were part of my high school. Growing up, and that was my high school's theater. That was the first time I ever saw a ghost.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah. Theater ghosts are always fun.
Well, it's such a like mundane story in the sense that like it was in a theater, but like so, and I told this last year, so I don't want to like go into too much detail if the listeners can hear the full story. But I was effectively in a darkened room at night in the theater, and a blue ball of light formed in the middle of the room, darted around the room, and then went into the wall.
Oh, that's so cool!
And it was I ran so fast and booked it down like 3 flights of stairs. It was, before that moment, I thought I believed in ghosts. At that moment, I 100% believed in ghosts. And
I do believe in spooks. I do. That's wonderful.
Yeah. But it's always like, these are like not like, I mean, I guess maybe, that theater was kind of the Wauwatosa East High School Theater is kind of a like weird labyrinth of spaces though. Like the building has the whole high school's got a condemned 3rd floor that is inaccessible.
Oh,
but the only staircase, like they sealed off all the stairwells except for a single one that is accessible through the high school theater through this like metal staircase that goes like 2 stories above the stage. Like,
oh wow.
Above the catwalks. And like
that's just like a haunted horror movie waiting to happen.
And that 3rd floor is like, and it's just like their entire classrooms that are still like existing up there. There's a ballet studio with massive paintings on the wall, like of things that used to be in the building. But so there's access to that through that theater. But then there's also an underground tunnel. There's a grade school across the street, and there used to be a connecting underground tunnel between the 2 buildings. And the tunnel's still there. They just sealed it off on the grade school side. But that's through the theater basement. Like this bizarre abandoned tunnel under the street.
Oh, jeez.
Also connected there. So it's, I mean, that place was, I mean, all theaters, like almost every theater I've ever been in has a theater ghost story, but like this theater in particular was begging to be haunted.
It really sounds like it. It's like they planned it.
Yeah. Well,
oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that the first ghost encounter that I remember having was something that dramatic and that interesting, but it's really not. The first one I remember is sort of well, I like to call it. Do you remember that poem, Yesterday Upon the Stair, I Met a Man Who Wasn't There?
Yeah. He
wasn't there again today. Oh, how I wish he'd go away.
Yes.
Yeah. It was sort of like that. I was in some sort of public building. I was with my mother. I was very young, single digits. I don't remember how old. I have it in my head that I was at church, but I don't know for sure. And I turned and I waved to somebody that I saw, because when you're a kid, you're conditioned to be friendly. And my mom turned to me and she was like, who are you waving to? And I said, oh, I was just saying hello to the man. And I pointed at a stairwell or a corner, something where there was an angle. And she just, the most vivid part of the memory for me, besides, seeing the other person in the room, was that she got this very funny look on her face and said, "Honey, there's nobody there."
Oh, dear.
And I was like, and it made no sense to me. I was young enough that it didn't register as anything but, what do you mean you can't see him? But that was, where the conversation ended, because Mom says there's no one there. So, okay, that's that.
Yeah.
But I was young enough that it didn't register as anything strange. It's like, oh, there's someone there. I should say hello, because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, the really wild stuff didn't start happening until I was a teenager. Like you, that's where the wild stuff started kicking in. And I lived in Bucks County, Pennsylvania for most of my life. I grew up in Dublin, and until I moved down to Virginia, I lived in Doylestown. So if anybody knows the area, they're probably clapping and very happy right now.
And I have no idea where any of these places are, but
it's just north of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of in that little that hook at the bottom that juts out into New Jersey. That's where it is.
Okay.
And the running gag is that all of Bucks County is pretty much crawling with ghost stories. There's no town that you go into that doesn't have like a handful of haunted buildings, just because the area is very old and most of it's very rural. So you have your ubiquitous, haunted farmhouses or old schools, or of course theaters, and a lot of the Revolutionary War happened in and around that area as well. Or at least that's where a lot of the encampments are. It's actually just a hop, skip, and a jump from Valley Forge.
Okay.
So, obviously there's that's the other running gag in the area, is that every inn worth its salt says George Washington slept here somewhere on the sign.
Well, he had to have slept somewhere.
Yeah, it's just all over the darn place. I think he just had a list, like, they've got to get me in somewhere. So I grew up, like just kind of thinking, oh, well, just everywhere has, all these spooky things. So it was sort of normal for me. And then, later on, I lived in an older house. It was an old farmhouse. It was built sometime in I believe it was the first half of the 19th century. I don't remember exactly when we found out it was, but it was close to 1850, but not after.
Okay.
And it was later built up and repurposed into 2 rental properties. And my mom, my brother, and I lived there when I was in my teens, and it was nuts is the word that comes to mind. There was a lot of nonsense that happened there.
Okay. Well, it's, in my experience, like when, and this is in my experience, as though I am the arbiter of all things that have ever happened. It's when you and maybe like it's just instinct that like I feel like when you split up a space, like when you change an older structure into something different, like divide it up or break it up, that just feels like it invites ghosts.
It kind of does. This isn't the first time I've heard, well, if you alter a space that's old in some way, it unsettles things. Actually, I spoke to, oh heavens, who was it? It was a very nice lady who ran a ghost tour company in New Hope, which was not far from where I was living at the time. Her name was Adele. I can't recall her last name, but she was a very nice lady. And one of the things she said to me was, when you renovate an older building, it's either going to stir up ghosts or get rid of them. And I guess in our case, it stirred them up something fierce.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine from high school. I grew up in mostly in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. It's a suburb of Milwaukee, like literally a block and a half out of the city of Milwaukee is where my parents' house is. And he grew up in one of the older houses in town, but it actually used to be located in a completely different neighborhood. There's this expensive neighborhood in Wauwatosa called the Washington Highlands. And it was an older like farmhouse that got relocated from there to the end of this little street. And like his street like goes to a cliff. Like,
oh dear.
Just like a ridge. And there's also a house at the edge of the cliff. It's just like house cliff. But the house that got moved there wasn't moved just as a single house. It was split in two. And so the house he grew up in was half of that house, and then the other half of the house was the house across the street.
Oh my.
And that he definitely 100% had ghosts. Like it it's he had a lot of stories about things that he saw in his home. I don't know how true some of them were. You know how you meet people who might tell you a story and you're not really sure if they're full of shit or not? He's one of those people. Yes. But I will say that while I never saw anything in his house, one night he, myself, and a third friend of ours, I'm not using names because I don't know how much these people would want me to air their business on the internet, but I'm telling the story anyways because I was there. But we'd been hanging out that night, and we were just literally, because the road dead ended, and he was like the last house on the left of the street. Like,
dun dun dun.
But like we were just like standing in the street talking, because we were getting ready to head out for the night, and my car was his house. So we're standing facing kind of the road. His house is on to the right of us. My car is parked on the street to the left, and I saw what like it's a thing that I wouldn't have believed if there weren't two other people there who saw it with me. I saw what looked like a person run from between two of the houses behind my car.
Oh dear.
Except the person was a little translucent. And it was one of those things where you go, did you just see that? And you are very unhappy when the other people say yes. We literally one of my friends went behind my car and chased it, and it kind of moved as a blur, but then all three of us were standing there staring as it went between two of the houses. Three of us sitting there, standing there, like staring at what looks like a person.
Oh, geez.
Between the houses, but we can see through them, and it was the most bizarre moment because, like the thing with, I saw a blue ball of light in a room years before that, and while I believe it happened, there's always some part of me going, maybe my brain's making this up. Maybe I hallucinated. Maybe something went wrong, but this was a moment where, there were literally, three of us standing there all staring at the same thing, seeing the same thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That was a weird one, but that's why you divide up houses, and that's exactly what I think. It's technically we were standing between two halves of the same house.
Oh, so the whole street there must have just been one giant liminal space.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you're right. That's gonna have something in it for sure.
So when you talk about, living in an old house that had been subdivided into multiple units, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. I can also kind of relate to what you were saying about, wondering, am I just seeing something? Am I just, is this a hallucination? That's how I spent a lot of my time in that house, because I was never quite sure, I had just been, through some stuff. My parents had just divorced. I was 12 years old when we moved in, and, it was a stressful time in my life, and there's all this other stuff going on in the mundane sphere of things. And, a lot of it, even now, I'm not sure how much was like, yes, this definitely, like, objectively more than likely happened, or, was I having night terrors? Was I hallucinating some of it? And I'm sure that there's some of it that didn't actually happen, and it was all in my head. But then there's other stuff that, like, no, wait, someone else was there. They, this happened to them too. Or just stuff that resonates with me so strongly, like even now, and there's a buffer of a good, oh gosh, 20 some years and about 350 miles between me and this house, and it still gets me sometimes when I least expect it. So one of the examples I like to talk about, speaking of the hold that things can have on you, even years later, is a particular incident where I was about, oh gosh, I'm going to go ahead and say maybe 14, 15 years old, because we moved out of the place when I was 16.
Okay.
And I was, I may stop and start a little because this one's it's rough.
Okay.
But I was just laying in bed one night and having some trouble sleeping, like you do. I had the worst trouble with insomnia in that house just because there were noises all the freaking time. There were footsteps that would go, back and forth in the attic, which was right over my room, or up and down the hallway, which was right outside of it. One of my doors didn't like to stay shut, so I always had to keep it locked. There were 2 doors in the room for some reason. I never knew why. But, this particular night, I was like, all right, I'm just going to lay here and stare at the ceiling, I guess. So I'm just sort of like waiting for sleep to come, counting sheep, thinking about literally anything but falling asleep, how you do.
Yeah.
And I hear this weird creaking sound, and it's very quiet, and I'm like, well, that's not the floorboards. That's not the usual stuff I hear, like, out in the hall or overhead. What is that? So I look down the end of my bed, and along that same wall was my closet. And because apparently I lived through a horror movie, the door was opening by itself. This particular floor was not on, like, any sort of angle. It wasn't subject to any sort of drafts or anything. Mm-hmm. But the door was opening. And I just kind of laid there and stared at it because, what the heck do you do?
Yeah.
So it did, like, open all the way till it was, like, perpendicular to the wall. And I just kind of lay there and stare at it. And then I see something go scuttling across the floor. And I'm like, wait, okay, maybe one of the cats got trapped in the closet. We had a few of them at the time. And it was, I felt a little better, like, oh, okay. That was, gosh, that was creepy, but it could be something silly, but no, it couldn't be that simple, could it? Otherwise I wouldn't be telling you this story.
I was going to say, and then I found the possum that got in,
God, I wish it had been a possum. I could have dealt with a possum. I could have dealt with just about anything, except obviously what happened next. So as I'm laying there and I've seen this thing scuttle across my floor, I just kind of, like, look away from it, and I hear something. I hear it again. This weird sort of, like, scrabbling noise across the floor, and I realize, oh my God, it's under the bed. And the second that I thought that and like realized it, I saw an arm come over the foot of my bed and grab the covers.
Oh, jeez.
And I mean, I was way too old to be like worried about monsters under the bed or anything like that. But at this point, I'd been living in this house for like 2 or 3 years. And I was like scared of my own shadow.
Wow.
I had seen a couple of things like prior to that, but they'd always been like, you know, outside, and I would look up and see something in a window for a second, and I was never sure that it was really there. It was like, no, it's the dead of night. I am staring at this thing at the foot of my bed, and I can feel it there. Like it was a heavy just thump, and I could feel the covers move when it grabbed the blanket.
Wow.
And so I didn't know what to do, so I reverted to being, you know, 5 years old and afraid of the dark. I pulled the blanket over my head and was like, it's not real. It's not real. If I don't look at it, it'll go away. If I don't pay any attention to it, maybe it'll leave me alone. It didn't. I felt another arm come over the end of the bed, and then I felt something start walking up the bed. I'm still not sure if it was walking or crawling. I just remember feeling a point of pressure on either side of me that was holding the blankets down, and it was like kind of pinning me in place. I couldn't really move. And right about the time that it got to chest level, I was pretty sure I was about to either have a heart attack or be eaten by something. And the worst part was it didn't make any sound. There was no weird breathing. There was no growling, no nothing. Just this awful, inexorable pressure that I could not get away from. And so just, it was like, okay, either I do something now or I'm probably going to die. So I just lurched up real quick, turned on my light, nothing. There's absolutely nothing on the bed. There's nothing on me, but the closet door was still open.
Wow.
And I was wide awake. I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure the whole time. Later, when I found out about, you know, sleep paralysis, and the things that people experience in sleep paralysis, I was like, wow, that sounds very familiar. I mean, I wonder, you know, could that have been part of it? Did I doze off for part of it and, you know, just imagine something? But the fact that the door was still open, it makes it stick in my head, and I'm still not sure.
Because I actually suffer from sleep paralysis.
So you know.
Yeah, no, it's and I like. So, but here's the thing with sleep paralysis: like you said, you pulled the covers up.
Yeah.
You can't do that with sleep paralysis. You literally cannot move. It's. I mean, because I've had vivid hallucinations with sleep paralysis, like. Including one when I was living in a house with a ghost, which, by the way, the ghost I lived with was way nicer than the one you dealt with. Wow. But I had known about, like, thankfully I as a kid had, you know, because I was interested in the paranormal and I read about UFOs also. I knew what sleep paralysis was before I ever experienced it. But the first time I experienced sleep paralysis, I've had vivid hallucinations with it. One of the notable times when I was living in a haunted house that, like, I was having a dream where I was in a fist fight with a guy.
Oh my.
And it wasn't like a real person. I don't know. I was working retail. I probably had some aggression.
You think?
Yeah, but I woke up and to the guy sitting on my chest choking me. And while I couldn't feel his hands on my neck, I could feel him on my chest. He was translucent, but I could feel his weight, I could see him, and I could see his arms wrapped around my neck, but I also was like, well, that was a dream. I must be experiencing sleep paralysis. And so it wasn't like, but I've had like terrifying, like every place I've lived since I lived with a ghost and just got annoyed with it, I have substantially warded and like shielded, and so I'm not really ever worried about like anything in my home. But like probably about 6 months ago, I like had a sleep paralysis moment where I woke up and at the foot of my bed. Have you seen the remake of Haunting of Hill House?
Yes.
So you know the hanging, like the woman,
the bent
ghost,
neck lady.
Yeah, the bent neck lady was literally standing at the foot of my bed,
Oh.
and I was just like, "This is from a TV show." Like my brain, my first thought was like, "I know I feel terrified right now because my brain's lit up, but this is literally from a TV show I watched."
Oh,
and
jeez.
it disappeared. So I was just like that. I was like, that was. But those I don't, so that's why like I'm pretty skeptical with my own haunting experiences, because I'm just like, I've had vivid hallucinations and sleep paralysis moments. So if a ghost ever shows up right when I wake up, I am never going to believe that it's real. Doesn't matter if it is or not. I'm immediately going to dismiss it because I've had like vivid full body like experienced hallucinations, including physical sensation from my sleep paralysis.
Oh, wow. Well, it's good though that you have like that sort of that cognitive reaction immediately, just like, oh, I've just woken up, so this must be, sleep paralysis happening, and it doesn't
move my body. I can't, like, I've had it way more often also without hallucination. So it's like I've had it both with and without, and like the part of your brain, like the fear center of your brain's all lit up. So you're gonna and you're still partially in a dream state, so you're gonna see whatever you're afraid of at that moment. And I had just watched the series that week,
right?
And so
I'm sure it doesn't help like the physical symptoms, and it doesn't help the being afraid. But at least you have like that one little synapse going. This might not be as terrible as you think.
Oh yeah, no, it starts out with fear and then goes straight into annoyance. Goes immediately into annoyance.
I'm familiar with that on a slightly different scale and slightly different circumstances, but yeah, can relate.
I mean, it's funny because the first time I experienced it, I was living in it's the haunted house you lived in sounds like the stereotypical place that definitely is 100% haunted, which is probably why you had to deal with something that was way more terrifying than what I had to deal with. I actually live down the street right now from the house that I used to live in that was haunted.
Oh my.
It is a duplex at the corner of Stein and MacArthur in Oak Grove, Wisconsin. I'll tell people that because I don't live there anymore, so I don't care. But I lived there from 2000 to 2003, and it's like it's an ordinary looking duplex that was built probably in the 1960s. Like that's when most of the neighborhood I live in right now was built, and it's like the first encounter I had with it is so mundane that I was in my bedroom and I kept hearing snoring from the opposite corner of the room I was in. Now
that's odd.
That is odd. I thought that maybe like I had a roommate, Famicom Dojo's host Sean Orange, also found on the Nerd and Tie podcast network. There's some synergy and cross promotion.
There you go.
But I lived in the house with him, and I was working retail. He was in college. We were in our early 20s, and I heard snoring coming from the corner. And my first thought is that the wall, though, is a house built in the 60s or 70s, and the walls aren't super thick. I assumed that I was overhearing. I was like, oh, my roommate's snoring super loud, because it was from the end of the room that also shared a wall with his room. And I kept noticing it, like, at night, and I was just like, wow, he snores really loud. And then, like, one morning, because I was working retail, he was in college, so we kept, weird hours. And one morning, I woke up, and I had to get up and do inventory, so I was up at, like, 5 in the morning. I had to go to work. And I was hearing snoring, and I was like, okay, that's weird. Except I got up, and his bedroom door was wide open. He wasn't in there.
Oh, dear.
In fact, he wasn't home. He hadn't come home yet from going out the night before because, again, he was in college. Like, I was the only one in the entire house, and this was, like, yes, it was a duplex, but it was a one-story duplex, and it was not anywhere, like, we were on the outer wall. So, like, the only walls that connected to my room were the outside and his room. And the snoring was coming from my room, and no one else was in the house. And so that's when I yelled at it to get out of my room. I never heard the snoring again. That ghost, besides terrorizing our cat, like, would move stuff around. There were a lot of times where, like, things literally moved out of, like, my drawers to my roommate's drawers, which didn't make sense as we did not share things, and also, like, it was like mundane things like towels, and it, like, would move around, and that was annoying enough. But there was the one moment that, like, kind of cemented that I was 100% sure that I was dealing with some sort of thing in the house was one day I have a wool driver's cap. I own many driver's caps, but I have one particular one that I had at the time that is my grandfather's hat, that I've had since he passed in '99. That was just it's a heavy wool hat. Like, it's not like a flimsy thin thing. It's got weight to it, and it was sitting on the kitchen counter. Like, and I watched it slide off the counter and fall to the floor.
Uh-oh.
To which I then again yelled at the thing living in that house to knock it off. And it stopped moving things for a while. It's mostly that thing. It was like living with a cat you didn't sign up for. You know, like when they want attention and they'll knock a lamp over and then the next time just, like, stare at you with a paw in the air. Like,
yep.
Yeah, it was like that. It was like the ghost equivalent of dealing with a cat all the time, as, like, things would get knocked over and things would move around and just, like, and also would scare the crap out of the actual cat that we did sign up for. But, like, so that's, like, that, like, my story of living with a ghost is like, oh, that's irritating, not something horrific came out of my closet and then tried to climb onto the bed.
I think I would have preferred yours.
I think, well, so the fun epilogue to the story is that the duplex I used to live in has been converted into an assisted living home for people with Alzheimer's.
Oh, no.
And so that thing just must be having a good time.
Oh, man. Oh boy.
Who would believe them?
I know. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, and I've worked in an assisted living home, back in my Pennsylvania days, right before I moved, and we had an Alzheimer's and dementia unit, and the things that they would tell you some mornings, that they had seen or dreamed of or thought they saw, and just it was harrowing sometimes, and it was really heartbreaking because first of all, the place was haunted as hell.
Of course it was.
Oh yeah, I mean there were people going in and out, pretty frequently because it was sort of an end of life care unit as well. So we had departures fairly regularly, but you'd hear things at night. You'd hear people walking up and down the hall when there was no one there. Doors would open and close, that sort of thing. But I always felt just a little bad for the folks in the Alzheimer's unit because they had a lot of stories that were just, everyone would go, oh, okay, Mabel, sure you did. That's exactly, let's go have some tea. And, she's like, no, really, there was someone in my room. And, it's hard to tell whether it's, it's them experiencing a hallucination or whether something might have actually been there. And,
yeah,
I always like to give them the benefit of the doubt because, there was there were spooky things at that place, and it's like, you know what? I believe Mabel. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, frankly, if a person is unhappy or scared, does it matter if it really happened?
Exactly. It doesn't matter if it happened or not objectively. It was very real and very upsetting to them, and therefore, should be taken seriously. I'm like I said, I'm still not sure if something came out of my closet or not, although with what you've said about being able to move, now I have to re-examine a few things.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'll tell you, right up until the arm came out from under the bed, my assumption was rat.
Yeah. Pet, cat, a possum. I would have liked a possum. That would have been nice. But it's actually nice to get like that extra sort of outside confirmation a little bit, even though it means scary things for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is that you don't live there anymore.
Yes, and it's very, very far away.
Yeah,
which is nice. But it's still like I said, it still gets me sometimes. Yeah. Like a few years ago, I went out with some friends and we went to see M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit. I think it is, where the two kids go to visit their grandparents, and crazy wild stuff happens. I won't spoil anything in case anybody hasn't seen it.
I was going to say
it's pretty good, and of course it has the what a twist ending, but it's a good twist. But there is a particular scene in that movie where someone's arm comes up rather suddenly over the end of a bed, and I had a flashback sitting there in the theater to that moment and promptly had a panic attack. This is like I said, it's a good 20 years later and hundreds of miles away, and I didn't know that it was still that strong. But in that second, I don't remember like the next 10 minutes of the film, because I was right back in that room, and it was happening in my head all over again, and it was like, oh my God, I didn't even know that was still in there.
Yeah.
Let alone that strongly. And I strongly remember getting out of the theater, and the goodbye to our friends like taking freaking forever. And finally I just handed the keys to my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, you have to drive. And he's like, okay, are you all right? I didn't think it was that scary. I'm like, just get me in the car, like shaking, just like get me in the car. And the second the doors were closed, I just completely melted down and just crying, hyperventilating, the whole bit. I was useless for the rest of the night. And I told him the whole story, and I hadn't before. But I told him, this is what happened, and that just took me right back there, and I was really scared. And fortunately, he was an absolute rock. He took me home. He took me through the motions of like cleansing the apartment. He's like, it's okay. Like you said, it was a long time ago, and it's far away, and who's the witch? Me. That's right.
Well,
yeah.
I think that like, and to loop it into some witchcraft, it's like, for me, like I finally learned how to like ward and put stuff up because of a bad experience with something that was kind of, I have one unpleasant experience. And I talked about it a bit last year on the show for listeners who want to go back. But literally involved like strangers writing me letters telling me that I had something after me. So that was fun. That was weird. But it was mostly just because at the time I was not good at shielding and warding, and this was a bad thing. And it went more after a friend of mine than it did after me. I was more of a bystander in that experience, but it was not fond of me because I did a very bad job at trying to ward it.
Oh.
And
So you just ticked it off.
I made it mad.
Oh no.
But I have gotten better since then.
Yeah,
But,
we're all rubbish when we start, aren't we?
oh my God, like, oh, some of the worst, like, just don't try, like, so pro tip, don't try to bind something if you don't really know what it is and hold it in one place. Instead, work on making a space that something can't enter. Just a
Oh my
smarter,
goodness. Yes.
just a dumb moment from me.
I mean, in hindsight, it's very funny, but at the time, I'm sure it was terrifying.
In my defense, I was only
yes.
like a witch for like a year at that point.
Oh, okay. You're entitled to quite a few mulligans at that stage, so we'll call that one a mulligan.
Yeah, and you know, it's like I think that like learning how to like ward and protect your space is maybe something that everyone should learn right away. And cleansing spaces is important. And maybe I have specialized tools that now go wherever I live and are placed in certain positions, and I am not experiencing that again.
Mm-hmm.
But
same. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I used to, like, after we moved out of that house, like, things pretty much immediately stopped. But then, you know, in the new place, it was like, oh, okay, you know, I feel safer. So maybe if something happens to roll through, I can try and, you know, I can Jennifer Love Hewitt this thing. I can help people.
No.
And that's exactly how, you know, the me from 10 years later is reacting is, oh, you dumb witch.
Well,
and yeah, so that stopped pretty quick. And then when I moved into my own place, it was like, nah, we're not even going to, no, away with you.
Well, it's my old wards used to try to keep just out negative stuff, and now it's just like everything out, done.
Nope.
I dealt with that stupid ghost cat or whatever that was for 3 years. Not again. I don't care. Everything is getting kicked out when I move in somewhere. I am pushing everything. I don't care if I got to push it into the neighboring apartment. Don't care. They can deal with it. All these units have the same layout. It can haunt there.
Congratulations on your new ghost cat.
Yeah. No, it's like, and I see these things, like, I occasionally like haunt the witchy tags on Tumblr when I'm bored, you know, just as something to do, glance at, and I just always, every once in a while, you see the worst ideas, like people inviting things in, and I'm just like, no, don't do that. That is, because, like, I don't know exactly what, I'm never going to claim to know exactly what ghosts are. People talk about them like they're the spirits of dead people, but I don't know if I actually buy that or not. You know, there's something. They are, like, I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe they are the spirits of dead people, but all I know is that they are some sorts of things that exist because I've seen them. I have dealt with them. I have had to pick my hat up off the floor. I know they exist, but they, you know, whether they are just some other form of thing or whether or not they're actual people, I don't necessarily buy that they're actual people. I just know that they are things that exist that scare the crap out of me or annoy the crap out of me. Those are the two categories.
Sounds about right.
But, like, I see these people on, like, I see these posts of, like, baby witches talking about, like, inviting things in and, like, trying to summon stuff, and I'm like, no.
Oh, honey, no.
The best case scenario is you bring in the most annoying thing ever.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
The worst case scenario is, I don't know, like, something that if it touches you feels like your energy's all being drained from you, or something that reaches out from underneath your bed. Like, these are bad things.
Yep. And I mean, you've read Grovedaughter Witchery. There is a chapter in there where I talk about, you know, there is a school of thought where it's like, oh, if I'm a witch, am I going to experience, ghosty things more often? Is it going to be drawn to me? And it's like, not necessarily, but also like be smart about it. It's not as easy as, the beginning of Labyrinth, where there's like this troop of goblins waiting for you to say your right words, and they'll, it'll summon something awful. But it's still like, you don't want to mess around with it too much. One of the things I like to tell folks who ask, apart from, yes, one of the first things you should learn is how to cleanse and ward your space and yourself, is never, ever, ever call up something unless you are 100% sure you can put it down again.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, either you or the tenants after you are going to have to deal with it, because how many episodes of, a haunting or whatever have we heard of where it's like, oh, the previous tenants used to blah, 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 and insert weird paranormal practice or occult rituals here.
Yeah.
And now we have to deal with the fallout. As much as I think like half of that is just staged for the benefit of, I don't know, a television audience, it's still like, if you're going to go mucking about with this stuff, you got to be smart.
Yeah, that's why the only paranormal investigators I'll ever believe are BuzzFeed Unsolved.
I love those guys. They are hysterical.
Oh, no, it's great. But also I'll say with warding and stuff that like there's a reason why, if anyone who's listened to last year's episode and listened to anything I've said this year, there's a reason why all my, like, I've been a witch for over 20 years, but all of my personal experiences, if you pay attention, all happened like 15 years ago or older. And it's
Same.
because I learned how to stop having to deal with this stuff. Like, it's...
Yup.
Like, I mean, I've been in places that are supposedly haunted since then, but I have never had to interact with anything because I decided a long time ago I don't want to interact with this stuff on a daily basis. It's very unpleasant. And so the first thing I learned how to do was how to not interact with it.
Yes. I remember learning that particular lesson and just being like, wait, witchcraft can get this stuff out of my life? Sign me up.
Right?
Oh my God. Actually, one of my favorite powder recipes is just my plain old banishing powder, and I swear by this stuff. And it's super easy to make. Here for your listeners, it's all stuff you can get in the grocery store. It's equal parts cinnamon, cayenne pepper, powdered eggshells, salt, and black pepper. You mix it all up together, and it smells wonderful. But don't sniff it too much; you will sneeze. I have made this mistake many times. It smells great. It's sort of like spicy and nice and inviting, but boy, will it clear your sinuses in a hurry. It'll also clear your house in a hurry. And, a pinch of that in the corners every so often, or, tossed over your threshold or put above the lintel or in the windowsills. And yeah, boy, does it keep out the pests.
That's probably the best.
It's better than borax for roaches.
Given on this show.
It's better than borax for roaches. Which is the other free tip for the day.
Oof.
Yep.
Well, the advantage to living in semi-rural northern Wisconsin is that cockroaches aren't really a problem here.
You have my envy. We're in the Tidewater area of Virginia, so they're like kind of a seasonal problem every so often. But someone on the tumbles who lives in a more rural southern area was like, yeah, we just put borax across the doorways, and they don't get in, and if they do, they die. And I'm like, perfect. So I employed that, and boy, did it get rid of the problem in a hurry. It was lovely. And the banishing powder works rather like that for ghosty things. If they're in there, they won't be for long.
Yeah, the big problem up here is deer.
Oh, God, yes. Pennsylvania can relate.
Yeah, so I live on the edge of town. Like, so Eau Claire is, it's not really small town. It's not a big place. It's 60,000 people.
Uh-huh.
But I live on the edge of town, like literally. My street is very suburban in styling and like all the amenities, but I look down the street and I see woods, like literal trees. Of course, and so I'm used to like deer in my own neighborhood all the frickin' time. But like a week ago, driving to the grocery store, which is like in the middle of like a very populated area. It's all neighborhoods and then highways around it and like all this stuff, and like 3 deer just came running out into the middle of the street last week. Like,
I remember reading about that on your Twitter. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I was not very awake while I was driving, but I was suddenly very awake while I was driving. Well, it's only funny because like I'm used to looking out for them. Like me seeing deer in the morning is not weird. It was the neighborhood I was in when it happened, because deer are in 2 places in this town. They're either right near the outskirts of town where I live, or they're down by the river, which goes through the middle of town because there's a lot of parkland around the river. And like apparently, I think I found the place where they cross between the 2.
Oh, geez. Are Wisconsin deer anything like Pennsylvania deer, where they will like stroll out into the middle of the road and like stare you down?
So here's the irritating thing about these 3 deer. Like, first off, yeah, of course they'll stare at you in the middle of the street. But 2 deer are in the 2 deer go straight in front of my car, and then the third one, as like I don't see the third one immediately, but it hasn't crossed the street. And I start pulling forward since like the 2 deer have passed me. The third one starts running along with my car.
Oh my.
And I had to like gas it to like outrun the deer because I just like at any moment, well, because there have been times where like in my closer to where I live, where I'm used to seeing deer, like I have been driving down the street and like I see a guy like maybe 2 blocks away is stopped, and I see deer crossing in front of his headlights at night, and I'm like, okay, I'll slow down and go forward slowly here. But then like while I was driving forward, a deer ran out of the darkness straight at my car, and I had to swerve around it because deer will just run right at your car.
Yeah, they're not smart.
No, I know it's not ghost related, but I will tell you, I've been more recently scared by deer trying to kill me than anything else. Now, if there was a powder or a banishment to get rid of deer effectively, I would be all for it. I've yet
Sadly,
to
that is not one I know.
Yeah. Ghosts are easier to deal with than deer.
Oh God, yes.
Ghosts don't carry ticks.
Or leave butt prints on the front of your car.
Yes, of course, possums eat ticks, but it was not a possum in the closet. Way to loop it all right back around there and somehow make this make sense.
That might be my new favorite hashtag. It was not a possum in the closet. I'm going to just keep that in my pocket. That's beautiful, man. I love it.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of critters, apart from cats being annoyed by ghosts, which was something else I did see in that house in Pennsylvania, I have found that my current pair also notice when something tries to come in, and one of them is really good at chasing them.
Okay.
This, I swear, if it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have believed it. So
that's the theme for most of this.
Right. I love it. So I have 2 cats. As one jumps up on my desk. Yes, you know what I'm talking about, you don't you? So as my social media followers may know, I have a couple of ginger tabbies, Havoc and Penny. This particular tale involves Penny. She is the younger of the two, arguably not the brightest cat in the world. She has trapped herself under a clear plastic tote on more than one occasion and gotten lost under a blanket pretty much every other day. She's not bright, but she's very sweet. So, this one occasion, it's a couple of years back, I was working from home at the time, and I happened to just kind of lean back in my chair and look down the hallway toward the living room / dining room area of our apartment. And I saw something walk from the living room into the dining room just real quick, right across. So that all I really saw was like a dark kind of moving blur. And I was like, okay, I think maybe that was my eyes playing tricks on me, except then I look down and there's this little 8-pound cat staring down the hall with her little tail straight up and just full bottle brush. And I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
So I kind of just look down the hallway and I kind of just watch for a minute, all right, if this is the sort of thing that I think it is, then it's gonna probably appear again, because the way that I have the place set up, all my protections and my wards and everything set up, the only thing that occasionally gets through is the kind of thing that likes to taunt you, assholes.
Okay. Yeah. The annoying category.
Oh yes, the super obnoxious kind. So sure enough, a minute or two later, I kind of see something just real quick peek out of the dining room around the edge of the furniture we have there. And I'm like, well, crap, here we go. And I start looking around for my stuff to, go take care of this.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, little Penny, and I don't think she was even a year old at this point, she goes tearing down the hall, just with the puffy tail in the air and hoof beats. She's a heavy-footed kind of cat, and she just took off after this thing. And I was kind of taken aback for a moment, okay, and I got up quick and followed her. And as I'm, coming into the living room, I hear her jump into the dining room window and just start hissing and spitting for all she's worth.
Okay.
And I come out, and the dining room, mind you, by the time I got there, is ice cold. And this was the middle of summer, so not the time for cold.
Yeah.
And there's Penny in the window just doing this lovely, perfect camel cat with the arched back and the puffy tail and just kind of snarling at something that is now outside. And I just kind of looked at her and I'm like, and stay out? And she kind of looked at me and shook herself and got down. And I still went around and cleansed and everything, but yeah. I firmly believe she chased the thing out, and it was just so surprised that it went.
Yeah.
It was so funny to me. I laughed for a good solid, I think, a half hour after that. She got so many treats. It was hysterical.
Yeah, even when I'm 100% certain that I've only had a sleep paralysis hallucination, I 100% also then recharge all my wards and re-cleanse my place.
Oh my God, yes, because just in case
I'm wrong.
Better to have it and not need it, right?
I don't think the ghost from Haunting of Hill House is literally here, but let's just be safe.
Let's hedge those bets, shall we?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good place to call it.
Alrighty.
Bree, why don't you tell the listeners where they can find your stuff on the interwebs?
Oh boy, you can find me just about anywhere. You can find me at Bree NicGarran on Instagram and Tumblr. That's BreeNicGarran. You can also find me at breenicgarran.wordpress.com. You can also find me on Patreon and on YouTube. And you can find all three of my books, Grovedaughter Witchery, The Sisters Grimmoire, and Pestlework, on Amazon.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And thanks to all of you at home for listening. I hope everybody has a safe and happy Samhain and or Halloween, just in case. Remember, this show is funded by listeners like you. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/TRAEGORN. And remember, you can follow BS Free Witchcraft on Facebook at facebook.com/BS Free Witchcraft, or you can find me on Twitter at TRAEGORN, at Tumblr at TRAEGORN.tumblr.com. And remember that you can always find the webpage for this at bsfreewitchcraft.trhonline.com or at nerdandtie.com/bsfreewitchcraft. We are a part of the Nerd and Tie Network. You know what else is on the Nerd and Tie Network? Stormwood and Associates, a weekly RPG actual play podcast set in a modern fantasy world. And that is, I'm one of the players. It's a great show, and you should check that out at nerdandtie.com/stormwood. And with that, my fellow chickens, we are bringing the show to a close. And I'll talk to all of you again in a month.